Hey everybody, welcome back to the series. Wanted to clarify a few things which came up in some comments in the last part. It is so important to understand the differences between biblical household slavery and the slavery instituted by men. There are differences. Many of you, the notion was that slavery is slavery and that's it, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's immoral, it's unethical, whatever the case is, and you've been absolute about it. Which I find kind of ironic, actually, because most of you atheist guys who have commented on videos of mine in the past believe that there are no absolutes, but yet in this issue you say it is absolutely immoral. It's not absolutely immoral. Now, the point, and I'll point out some of the differences as well, but the point is that biblical household slavery is not immoral. However, I am not saying that it is a good thing either. It is not a pleasant thing. It is a judgment upon people for sin and unbelief. It is not something that I think should be reinstituted. And here's why. And this is one of the major differences between the context of biblical household slavery in the Old Testament and slavery of modern times, like the slavery of blacks. The difference is, back in Old Testament times, they were under a theocracy. God was directly in charge of life as they knew it. It was a theocracy. We no longer live in a theocracy. God is sovereign, but He does not operate in government the way He operated in the Old Testament. He just doesn't. It's completely different. So it would be wrong for us to reinstitute slavery. It would be wrong because it would be led by the wrong people. It would be led by the wrong government. Okay? That's one major difference. So you cannot say that they were the same thing. Now the other thing is, since God it was in charge and it was a theocracy, God was the one who instituted it. God was the one who administrated it. Now, God, and we're going by Scripture here because that's what we're talking about here. We're looking at Scripture. We don't care how you feel about such things. We don't care how you feel about God. We don't care whether you don't believe even one word in the Bible. But if you're going to scrutinize the Bible and you're going to analyze the Bible, you've got to look at it for what it says. God is holy. God is perfect. God is incapable of immorality, incapable of sin. He is slow to anger. He abounds in loving kindness. There is Scripture upon Scripture upon Scripture upon Scripture which proves the character of God. Bearing that in mind, we must bear that in mind when looking at these types of situations, such as slavery. You cannot just look at a verse in Leviticus about slavery and say, well, that's immoral, so God is evil. You are not the judge. God is the judge. You are not the judge. I don't care if you think God exists or not. It doesn't matter. You're looking at the Bible. Go look else if you want to judge something. Go look at the slavery of blacks in our own American history. Those people were unrighteous. Those people were immoral. That was absolutely wrong. And here's why. One of the reasons why, anyway. Dr. Jordan says in chapter 4 of his book, the sinner has a drive to exercise godlike dominion over the world, a dominion that circumvents the limitations of time, space, and matter. He desires instantaneous results. Since, in the nature of the case, destruction is more instantaneous than upbuilding, the sinner tends to destroy rather than to build. What is slavery of our own history like? Well, it was about tearing down. It was about oppression. It involved torture. There is nothing in the scriptures that talks about tearing down a person. You say, well, owning another person is just tearing down someone. Well, not in this context, it wasn't. It was about building up someone. It was about taking a person whose life was a rotten mess, pulling that person into the covenant, or in the realm of the covenant, into the home of the deemed righteous. I'm not going to say righteous because they were not righteous in and of themselves. They were declared righteous because they were God's chosen people. Okay? We're going to get into the types later on. But they were brought into this environment to be trained, to be evangelized, if you want to use that term. They were offered an opportunity that no one else could benefit from unless you were chosen of God. Is that wrong? Some of you would say, well, it's their choice. They should be able to choose what they want to believe in, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's where I'm going to get to next. And we're going to talk about man's view of freedom, because the view of freedom is really one of the key issues at the heart of this whole thing. And it's very common, a very common view of modern natural man, that freedom, their view of freedom is, freedom means that I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, with whomever I want. In other words, freedom is equal to autonomy. That's not even what our forefathers meant about being free. Freedom is not about autonomy. At least proper freedom is not about autonomy. If you want to talk about that kind of freedom, well, that's a prelude to chaos. Proper freedom is being free to do what you ought to do. Now, man does not have his own free will. Back in the Garden of Eden, before Adam sinned, they had freedom. They had the freedom to obey God, but they were also created with the freedom not to. Now, Adam chose to sin. Why? Because he wanted to be like God. He wanted to make the decisions. He wanted to be the head honcho. God said you can do whatever you want. You can do this, you can do that. But do not eat of the fruit of that tree over there. There was nothing special about that fruit. There was nothing special about that tree. That was just God saying, you have freedom. I give you perpetual life. But you cannot, for 1 minute, think that you are the creator, that you are sovereign. I am the one who's in charge. You obey me, you will be happy. Was that oppressive? Absolutely not. Why? Because God is holy. God is love. God is all of his attributes, all of the time, for eternity.